Hello, welcome back to another Fowler's channel. I'm Jay from Jay Post Corner. If you can hear my cat, she is laying right here. She is purring up a ton, which I adore, and I'm happy for her. That's what she deserves. She deserves the whole life, right? I'm Jacob from Jay's Post Corner, in case you've never been here before. And today we're going to be talking about Britney Spears' memoir, The Woman in Me. I figured I would live react to this for you guys, so I'm going to vlog it as if I'm vlogging like a normal fiction book, just because Britney Spears is somebody I've been following my entire life. I just went and saw Crossroads in theaters for the first time last night, and it was life-changing. It's like a life-changing experience from a movie that I used to watch every single day for like 7 years straight. No joke. Britney Spears and I were the shit, okay? We were so close as a human, as one could be from a fan's perspective. I'm so excited to read her memoir. I'm going to be listening to it. I prefer to listen to memoirs. I do know she doesn't read it to me. Michelle, I want to say Monaghan, that's wrong. What is her name? Michelle something. I can never remember her last name. And from Dawson's Creek, and also from that Oz movie, Blue Valentine, and things like that. I have a lot of questions. I'm curious to see how it's written. Is because obviously we've seen her writing in other places, and so I'm curious to see what her writing looks like in a book. It is so short though. Like, on a side note, it's like 280 pages. This is going to take me no time to read, but in case you don't have a physical copy, the front and back pages are that, and then the book itself has like this like really pretty like flower on it, which I'm a big fan. She reads the opening, the fan dedication and things, if I'm not mistaken. She probably also reads the acknowledgements. She's come out and said the reason why she didn't want to read the memoir herself is because it was such a traumatizing experience to write the book, that to her personally she would rather have somebody else read it for her. And I'm assuming she picked Jen from Dawson's Creek, I can't remember her name, because that's who she would want to play her in a movie one day or something. That was my best guess. I'm really excited to hear a whole book from her. I've read a few short stories where that person has read it to me and I've enjoyed them in the past, so I'll update you as I go along and read it. That's all I got for you. We're gonna start it probably today or tomorrow. I'm very excited about it. Hello, I want to come in here and give you guys the first update for Britney Spears' The Woman in Me. I have several posted notes. These are things that I think would bring up interesting conversations, and also just things in general. Some things have already been talked about in the media, some things have not, so I figured I'd just throw my 2 cents in on the conversation. So first starting, and I'll tell you the page. I'm really liking the writing so far. For anybody out there who's curious about reading it, I think Michelle Williams is doing a phenomenal job with the narrating as well. I think we're just now getting to the conservatorship. Some of the bigger things I didn't really realize because of her relationships with her parents nowadays is how close she was with her mom, how horrible her dad has always been. She's very kind to her dad in this novel, which I always find to be very sweet for the different things that he does to her when she was younger. It's very verbally abusive and things. You know, she tried really hard to make her family this wonderful thing. Then we also have Jamie Lynn, who I'll talk about briefly through here. She's not really mentioned much. She is called a bitch in the novel, which I found to be quite, this is when she was like 13 is when she was called a bitch from Britney, essentially. And Britney decided her entire life was to make Jamie Lynn Spears' life better than what her life was. To make sure Jamie Lynn had all of the nicest things. It was basically just like, who fucking cares? She had mentioned, it's not highlighted or anything. There was a comment in here where she was like, oh, I can't, like, why'd you buy a house? In Britney's head, she's like, because you guys need a new house. You guys were from a trailer park in Alabama or Louisiana or something like that. I bought you a house that you guys can be proud of, that you can bring your friends over. You have all this shit because of me. And we're going to soon see that kind of pop up. So, other things I didn't know, the first thing I did take note of was that she was signed at 15. I knew it was young, I just didn't realize how young it was. Also, she never once talks about, because she's extremely sexualized as a child, which is mentioned briefly later on. It's not really something we're talking about, but interestingly enough, she had no problems with that whatsoever. She just liked being girly. She liked wearing all these girly dresses that were short and high heels and things that made her feel really special. And so she never once personally felt like anything. Like, she never once, obviously the common thing we hear a lot, especially with celebrities, which makes a lot of sense, they didn't grow out to be, some type of role model, and she didn't grow out to be a role model. She was a 15-year-old girl from Alabama who wanted to wear dressy things. That's essentially what it is. So it was like one of the first things was that she was recorded. That was on page 49. I'm not going to read you direct quotes. I'm just going to pull out the post-it notes as they come up. On chapter 9, on page 53, they had the concept for Baby One More Time, which is one of the most iconic music videos of all time. It's parodied so much, there's people still dress up from it. And ironically, it was the mock-up had her looking like a Power Rangers in space, which she eventually would go do a music video of sorts like that. So I thought that was really interesting that eventually that concept did come through, but it was her baby. Baby More Time was her idea, had her teacher in it from her hometown. It was like one of her big things. And she also talked about how one moment she was like touring malls, next moment she was the biggest star in the entire world. Baby One More Time went platinum, you know. The album, which came out on January 12th, 1989, which is crazy, it's like 10 days after I was born, it hit Billboard 200 chart. She's the youngest person to ever do all these different things, all these records, and I thought that was also notable, and it's not very dramatic. I have some of the more dramatic things in here, but just saying. Next thing, we're gonna jump over to her relationship with Justin Timberlake. Obviously, she's known Justin Timberlake since she was really young with the Mickey Mouse Clubs, which was one of the first things she ever did. One of the things that's very interesting that she points out is that NSYNC, Backstreet Boys made them like a white boy band. NSYNC went for like hip hop and R&B and stuff, which put them more on the ground with other black groups and things like that, whereas, you know, they were going for a different sound and stuff. They weren't R&B, they were more pop, which especially back then, she said, outside of like, unlike Backstreet Boys, which was like a white group is what she says, and Sync hung out with black artists. Sometimes I thought they tried too hard to fit in. One day, Jay and I were in New York going parts, towns I'd never been before, walking our way with a guy with a huge blinged out metal lion. He was flanked by 2 giant security guards, and then Jay said something really racist. I'm not going to specifically say what it is here. It's on page 58, in case you guys are wondering. It is all over the internet right now, so you can also find the quote on the internet. It's one of the most talked about things from the book, I would say. One of the bigger things. And then she started talking about Mariah Carey, because a lot of people, when she in the beginning, like Justin Timberlake was not a big name, and so she doesn't treat them like a big name, which I thought was really interesting, choice-wise, but like Mariah Carey and almost everybody else afterwards is. Why did everyone treat me, even when I was a teenager, like I was dangerous? There's like a purpose behind, I guess, some of the ridiculousness, but also like it is a person. How much of it is warranted and things like that, I guess, is the bigger question, right? So she had talked about doing Crossroads. She had talked about how she was about to do The Notebook, and she was excited to work with Ryan Gosling again, but she was happy she didn't get that. And then she was offered in 2002 the role in Chicago, and she was offered directly the role in Chicago, and she had turned down 4 or 5 other movie deals because she was on tour and she was loving her tour, and she was just really happy with the Dream Within a Dream tour. She was just really happy in general with everything going on in her life at this moment in time, and she actually chose not to do it. But she makes several comments about how she was like really mad that she didn't do Chicago. She really wishes that's something she did, and I thought that was interesting when I had heard about it before I read the book, and so now hearing it in context also makes it obviously very interesting. Then we get into the really nitty gritty in the badness of her relationship with Justin Timberlake. So Justin Timberlake was young. I mean, I think that's really what this whole thing comes down to, right? Is that he was young. She had found out a while into the relationship that he was cheating on her. He had cheated on her, I think the proven time is like 18 times during the entire time they were in love, and she did nothing about it. It was a big thing. A lot of people criticized her for not doing anything about it, but also the media took his side, blaming her as the cheater. There is a point in this novel, just not that long, that's on page 74 when she starts talking about the cheating. On page 75, she talks about how she did cheat on him once with Wade Robinson, and they both kind of just said whatever, you know, that's just what it is, and they kind of just moved on. But I found it very interesting how much he cheated on her, how she knew he cheated on her as well. She loved him. They were together for a long time, and she loved him, and she wanted everything to do with him and stuff. To the point of let's get to the baby. So the baby is a big topic of conversation. It is not proven in here that the song Every Time is about the baby. The music video basically states that, but I'm not here to put information that's not given to us by Britney herself out into the world. And after reading so much of the book, over 100 pages, I do think she wrote this. I wasn't sure because she didn't narrate it, and sometimes that's a clear give that it was a ghostwriter, but I'm pretty sure Britney Spears wrote this. That's where I'm at. So she had an abortion. She was Justin Timberlake. She says in the book she did not want to, and that if it was up to her and her own decision, she wouldn't have done it at all. She also said she would have gone to the doctors. Something else I learned in here, I'm not going to talk about in graphic detail because it is talked about in graphic, which is great, it needs to. I'm just not going to. It's on page 76. If you guys are interested in reading the entire thing about it, due to the fact that they didn't want people to know that she was pregnant or she had any inkling that she was pregnant, and Justin being pregnant and things like that Justin was going to have it be a dad or whatever, they decided, well, I think he more decided because of how her reflection is on this. She did say she is part of the decision making here, but she really wishes not, that they would do it at home. She took a pill and she did it at home with her best friend and him, and he decided to play the guitar to help her feel better. That, my friend, is just really gross. Then with his first album Justified coming out, he dumped her through a text message while she was filming a music video. Yeah, I'm losing a lot of respect for this man, not gonna lie. let's continue onwards, right? We're not done yet. So she lost her entire family, essentially, because Justin Timberlake's family was her family. She went home. This is the part where she called her sister a bitch, because it was just nothing like she ever expected, and she hated her family and hated the fact of being home and doing all these things. Then she talks about Cry Me a River, and I wanted to mention Cry Me a River as well, because he played a snippet of a song called Don't Go Horrible Woman, which is a song on his album, which is supposedly about Britney Spears and how she's a horrible woman. And then Cry Me a River is about how she cheated on him, even though she did at one point. I like the line on page 87 that says, "May I just say that on his explosive album and in all the press surrounded it, Justin neglected to mention the several times he cheated on me. They've always been more layaway in Hollywood for men than women, and I see how men are encouraged to talk trash about women in order to become famous and powerful, but I was shattered." And she truly took this thing that he did to heart, and she was truly affected by it, and I just felt really, really bad reading this entire section. I knew it was going to. She felt so much pain. Then she went on to work with Madonna, and that was all her idea, but these are just the highlights that I think I should pull. Are they the flashy ones? It's debatable. It's besides the point. This is where we're headed. I'm liking it so far. So this video is divided up into 3 parts instead of 2, because I'm on page 177 now. So the first one is starting on page 108. Talk about in this particular chapter about how she got married randomly in Vegas one day. It was a fun, drunken thing that she did with a childhood friend. It didn't really mean anything. She didn't really want to marry him, but she felt like it was really weird that her parents were so against her marrying. They got a prenup. It took 50 hours to do, and so she was like, well, that's really weird. And I really like the line here. What do I have over you guys? I wondered. Why would someone else be so huge, such a huge threat? Perhaps it's worth mentioning that by this point, I was supporting them financially. Something to keep in mind as we continue to go through this horrible cycle of abuse that she's about to render through her life, which is extremely tragic. Jumping to page 100, like 10 pages later, I want to quickly mention the Alexa stuff from Zoe 101. So she is pregnant, and when she was pregnant, she loved 2 things, sex and food, which I thought was really funny. So she was extremely protective over Jamie Lynn because she was a mama bear. And one of those things that she had heard was that Jamie Lynn was being severely bullied by the person, right? And so she went in and she yelled at them, which has been publicly talked about a bunch on the internet. And what I must look like hungry, a hugely pregnant, yelling at a teenager, and I would learn later, innocent girl. Are you spreading rumors about my sister? To that young actress, I am sorry. Jumping up to page 131, this talks about how she had postpartum depression after she had her babies. She had her babies back to back. So the first one was born, and then 9 months later, the second one was born, or it's about 12 months later, because they had to take a little bit of a break, but they were born really close. She's really grateful for them being born really close to one another, just because it means you always have a constant friend. And so she was happy about that, but she was in an extremely fragile state. And she became very empathetic towards them, and she almost embodied what they were going through as her, which is something that does happen. It did give birth to a baby, and she wished that she would have been able to know that information. Now people do. So she's happy that her book gets to come out, and hopefully to inform more people about it as well. And then she's mad that Kevin, who she's married to by this point, is so much further away. Her basically as like this piece of engagement for his new music career that he's trying to build. She talks very poorly about Kevin. Then I want to talk about Blackout. Me and my mom were just talking about Blackout, how Give Me More, particularly the video and those type of things, are so sad to us because it's such a hard time in her life. So let's talk about Blackout. So she's not really proud of the actual music video because it looks really cheap. With her words, to be fair, it's by far the worst video I've ever shot in my life. I don't like it. That being said, she said really amazing things about Blackout as an album. Blackout was one of the easiest and most satisfying albums I ever made. It came together really fast. I'd go into the studio, be in there for 30 minutes, and leave. That wasn't by design. It had to be fast. If I stayed in one place for too long, the popular outside would multiply like I was cornered Pac-Man being chased by ghosts. My survival mechanism was to get in and get out of the studio as fast as possible. When I recorded Hot as Ice, I walked into the studio and there were 6 gigantic guys in the room with me sitting there. That was probably one of the most spiritual recording moments of my life, with all those guys quietly listening as I sang. My voice went the highest it had ever gone, and it sang it 2 times though, through and left. I didn't even have to try. If making Blackout felt so good in my life, her entire life was tearing apart around her, yet Blackout was one of the best things. It's one of her best albums. It is her favorite album she's ever recorded in her entire life, and she was going through the hardest part of her entire life. And then she also talked about how Kevin himself, she wanted to be his wife. She wanted to have his kids. She loved him. and she lost them to this fame. And she says that's something she sees over and over again, especially in guys. Once the guys have the fame, it's basically game over. And that was something that she did talk about. And she had an interesting line on page 139 saying, looking back, I think that both Justin and Kevin were very clever. They knew what they were doing, and I played right into it. Because Kevin had asked for her to publicly divorce him. Kevin had also asked to be, and then she realized after she did that, she looked horrible in front of everybody in America. And then America decided to butcher Kevin live on television, which she truly hated. It was doing nothing for her and also nothing for her court case battle for her children, because they both went into the court case asking for full custody, and you know how that went. She realized much later on in life that just like Justin publicly broke up with her and tore her down completely in the media, Kevin was doing the same. Then she talked about all the drinking, partying, drugs that she was supposedly taking, because people around her were also taking. Interestingly enough, I've heard this account from Paris Hilton's experience as well in her book, It's Me, Paris. Also, I think she talked about her documentary that she wrote off of that book. I've never heard it from Lindsay Lohan's perspective, because Lindsay Lohan's never wrote a book. I would totally read that book, Lindsay Lohan, I'm just saying. But that's my point. She obviously was doing a lot more stuff, Lindsay Lohan. That's always been proven. Very sad, very tragic. But she's in a great place, so good for her. She came back. She does remark about the famous picture, a photo online of them all three in the back. You know, Paris in the back, Lindsay and Britney. You know how it goes. So on page 142, she states, "And do you know what Paris and I did that was supposedly crazy night everyone made such a big deal about? When we went out with Lindsay Lohan, we got drunk." That's it. She talks about the only thing that she truly abused outside of drinking, which did never get as bad as her father, but was not always great, was Adderall. On page 148, she shaves her head. Part of the reason why she shaved her head in February of that year was because Kevin decided not to allow her to see her kids. Jaden was 5 months, Sean was 17 months, so she did the only thing she could think about, and that was shaved her head. On page 148, she states, "With my head shaved, everyone was scared of me, even my mom. No one would talk to me anymore because I was too ugly." Her mom called her ugly to her face. My long hair was a big part of what people liked. I knew that. I knew a lot of guys thought long hair was hot. Shaving my head was a way of saying to the world, fuck you. Then on page 153, we talk about what happened with the green umbrella situation, which also was very criticized through the public eye. The paparazzi was at its hardest during the album of Blackout, when it was first coming out in October of that year. There was the mental breakdown that she had, which obviously, as I'm reading this book, it was not a mental breakdown. She was very mentally sane. There's a line in here which I'm really excited to read to you, which proves the point. But with that being said, she had gone through rehab already through this point. It was subjected by her parents. They said you have to go through rehab, but she didn't understand why, because she wasn't doing drugs. This was a mental break, not a drug-related break. Rehab makes you look like you're doing drugs. And so the whole world thought she was off on her hand with drugs, wasn't allowed to see her children, and everybody around her was talking shit about her. She finally snapped. And she grabbed a green umbrella, didn't even hit the man, and purposely hit the car. And there's a line, pathetic really. An umbrella, you can't even do damage with an umbrella. It was a desperate move by a desperate person. She eventually contacted and gave the agency an apology note and whole 9 yards. And paparazzi went on to say in an interview and a documentary about me, that was not a good night for her, but it was a good night for us because we got the shot. So then she talked about her VMA performance during Give Me More, and she says that she was having a panic attack, and she went out there, and page 157, I'll read you a paragraph. "I went out there and did the best I could at the moment in time, which, yes, granted, was far from my best at other times. I could see myself on the video throughout the auditorium while I performed it. I was looking at myself in a funhouse mirror." A few paragraphs later, she states, "You also don't usually have one of the worst days of your life in the same exact place the time your ex has one of the best." Justin had one of his best performances at the VMAs that night as well. Page 160, "I began to suspect that they were secretly celebrating that I was having the worst time in my life, but surely that couldn't be the case, right? Surely I was paranoid, right?" We talk about, so on page 165, so she started a relationship with a photographer. The photographer, she would eventually learn, was married and all these other things. She also didn't know Kevin had a kid, before they got married. She was not exactly someone who looked into things. She just jumped into things. So, she didn't know Kevin had a kid and was having another kid on the way. They started dating and going to, really not love each other. This photographer was using her. That has since been proven. I'm not to that point yet where it's been proven, but it's been since proven. But she was his mistress. And she ends up at this house. And at this house, suddenly there was a SWAT team, what seemed like 20 cops in the house, and she was screaming, "What the fuck did I do? I know I've been acting wild, but this was nothing I'd done to justify treating me like this. I was a bank robber, nothing justified upending my entire life." This starts what we would like to call the Conservatorship, also called guardianships, are usually reserved to people with no mental capacity, people who can't do anything for their sons, but I was highly functional. I had just done the best out of my career. I was making a lot of people a lot of money, especially my father, who I found out took a better salary than he paid her. He paid himself more than $6 million and some people more than $13 million, where she was not getting that. My dad was able to set up two forms of conservatorship. So the first one was of the person and the other one was the estate. So the person is designated to control her entire life. She can't drive anywhere, she can't go anywhere, she can't do anything, and she was legally told by the lawyers, not the lawyers, but the court, that she was demented. She begged for anybody else could be a random person outside the street, come and do this instead, but they gave it to him. Then the other one, the estate, means he has the entire control over her entire estate, and estate is worth, in my case, tens of millions of dollars. At one point managed the constructs to keep them from being subject to undue influence or fraud. The role was taken by my father in conjunction with a lawyer named Andrew Wald. He would eventually be paid to $426,000 a year for keeping me from my own money. I would be forced to pay upwards of $500,000 a year to my court-appointed lawyer, who I wasn't allowed to replace. Then let's talk about her mother. Did not know this. Did you? I'm sure you did, but I did not. Her mother wrote a book, a memoir, during this entire process, talking about how amazing Jamie Lynn is and how beautiful she is for growing this baby inside of her while she's going through all these problems, because Jamie Lynn was also being shunned by the entire world for being pregnant at 16, 17. And then she got married to the dad, so everybody's like, oh my god, look at this beautiful story. And then she would show pictures of her daughter, Britney, on screens at these like press events or whatever, talking about how much she was a happy child and how look at what the horrible state she was in. So her mother wrote a book about her and promoted it. That is so fucked up. And on page 170, she also makes a comment about that, saying, and yet I look at the worst things I did during this time, and I don't believe the sum total of them is anywhere near as cruel as what my mother did by writing and promoting that book. Because I've been wondering why they have such a horrible relationship, and that would do it. I think, in my opinion, that would do it right well. So then lastly, let's talk about, so her dad has officially moved into her house and is now taking full control of her life. 174 pages in the book, which is really shocking. That means we're only going through 100 pages of the rest of her career, which is crazy, but I'm sure we can do it. One thing I want to talk about is the bowl that had a bunch of receipts. This right here, I think, is the most proven thing that Britney Spears was extremely sane mind because of what it was. So let's talk about it. On page 174, it states, yes, here's my concession. I was so nerdy that I kept all my receipts in a bowl. Each week, I would add up my expenses old school style to keep track of my deductions for taxes. Even when I was going through a wild spell, the fundamentals of who I was as a person was still there. To me, that bowl of receipts was proof that I was still capable of managing my affairs. I knew musicians who did heroin, got into fistfights, and threw TVs out hotel windows. Not only did I not steal anything, or hurt anyone, or do hard drugs, I was keeping track of my tax deductions. He sat down, and he said, I call the shots. You sit right here in this chair, and I'll tell you what goes on. I looked at him with a growing sense of horror. I'm Britney Spears now. I will come back when the book is done. Hopefully that clip's not 20 minutes long, but hey, editing Jacob loves 20-minute clips. That's a joke. Alright, hello. I want to come in here and give you guys the final update for Britney Spears' The Woman in Me. I just finished it literally like maybe 2 seconds ago, and I have so many more pink little tabs. I've been using pink. That seems to be the key color for her for this book, so that's the color I used. And once again, we're just going to go through it. I have a lot of notes, a lot of thoughts and opinions on the things that I read. We're going from 179 to 278, so it's over 100 pages worth of thoughts. So sorry if this clip is long. Sorry if the video is long, but I had thoughts. Also, I'm just informing you, So by this point, she's pretty deep in conservatorship. One of the things I took note of is this section on page 179 where she is starting to think that they're trying to kill her. I really thought it was interesting to learn about her everyday life in this life for 13 years. Essentially, she had locks on her phone she couldn't get into. She had certain pills she would take. She was watched going to the bathroom for 13 years. It was to stay for 13 years of her life. Also very interesting. I don't know how she feels about her albums between Breakout and Glory, but you'll soon find out that she really liked Glory and she really liked Breakout or Blackout. So I have to wonder if like Britney Jean, Femme Fatale, and those ones, if she was more pressured, because it does talk about how she basically lost her love for the entire process of it. Then also the breakdown tour. So with the circus tour, it grossed more than $130 million. During the year of 2019, where she didn't do anything, she had a flat fee. Everybody got a flat fee except her, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Her father also got a percentage of her. She got about $16,000 a month. It's later on talked about how she got a $2,000 weekly allowance. And to the point where when she was in Las Vegas, she tried to take her dancers to show their support, and it was like $10 or something like that for the meal, and because like a bunch of people, and she tried paying for it, and they denied her card because she didn't have the money on her card due to her allowance. Then also, I feel really bad for her. For the 13 years her dad criticized her body. He told her she was ugly, he told her she was fat, he put her on all these different diets. She at one point only ate chicken and vegetables for 2 years straight, nothing else. No one could bring her anything, and there's a lot of comments about this, and it just makes me really, we'll talk about the Instagram stuff later. It really just shows, just keep your mouth shut, people. Then on page 189, she says, the thing was, I accomplished a lot during the time when I was supposedly incapable of taking care of myself. In 2008, I won more than 20 awards, including a Cosmetology Ultimate Woman of the Year award. At the VMAs, just 1 year after I've been knocked for my Giving More performance, I won 3 Movement. My video Piece of Me won every category it was nominated, including Video of the Year. I thank God, my sons, and my fans for standing by me. Then she talked about how she was a judge on the X Factor. These are things to get away. By the way, she went along with all this to see her kid. A judge on the X Factor, and she realized at that point that she could not do that. She could do a short little cameo in like a TV show or a movie or something, but she could not be like someone on camera for 8 hours judging these people and doing this. This was just not who she was, and so she had a horrible time doing the X Factor. Not so much like with the people, but just in general, like her enjoyment of it was really, really bad. Then she started her residency. She got offered a residency in Las Vegas, and she started it, and she said during the beginning part of her residency, she absolutely loved it. She felt the control, and she was so happy to feel her fans. But she was in that residency for like 3 or 4 years, which culminated over 190 different concerts. And so yeah, I think that would get somebody, if I'm going to be honest with you. Then let's talk about how people talked about her body on page 200. It's always incredibly that so many people felt so comfortable talking about my body. It started when I was young. Whether it was strangers in the media or within my own family, people seemed to experience my body as a public property, something they could police, control, criticize, or use as a weapon. My body was strong enough to carry 2 children and agile enough to execute every choreographed move perfectly on stage. And now here I was, having every calorie recorded so people could continue to get rich off my body. This is, I think, very important, especially for the ending conversation about her posting nude on Instagram and all these dances and stuff and people being concerned about it. I think it just really shows that we shouldn't be, because it's proving time and time again she is just really, really happy where she is at, and she's happy to be able to do this on her own, to be able to like express herself the way she's expressing herself. So in 2014, she decided to make a push to get out of her conservatorship. She tried to get the courts to look into his alcoholism, the erratic behaviors and things. None of that ended up actually working out, and she also went on to a talk show that never aired. The section where she talked about never aired. That's interesting. I was curious. She didn't mention what the talk show was, but I would be curious what it was. And then she started writing Glory. She wrote Glory with Joey Michaels, who we all love and adore, who's written a lot of things. I didn't know she helped write Glory, though. And Justin Trainer throughout the entire album, and she fell in love back with the process of making music again. And she felt happy about going back on tour because she wanted to sing it. Her kids were proud of her, and eventually this would be a problem. She also obviously met the love of her life while making this one, Hasim Agari, on the set of Slumber Party. She was also in like 2 other music videos of hers for that album. I don't think they're together anymore, if I'm not mistaken, but they don't get divorced in this book. I think they're divorced now. She talked about how promoting Glory, because she was still, when Glory came out, she was still doing residency tours in Vegas, that she really, really liked it, and she wished that she could continue to remix and do things with the songs to make them even more fun for these different things for her fans. And she once again kept getting told no, no, no. She talked about when Glory came out, she received the Radio Disney Icon Award, where essentially she took her boys and then, they did a melody of all her different songs and things. And she also talked about how she did a concert special I've done for In the Zone. It was a remix ABC special ABC special that she totally loved, and one of the best things she's ever done. But she was sitting there while watching these people sing her songs to her, something she's been so desperately wanting to do with her own music, to remix it. And her sister comes out and does, her part of it, and things, and she was crying, but she also said she felt this deep sadness because why could they do it and why can't I? And she talks about overprotected. So a lot of songs from that particular era really speak true to the novel itself. Overprotected, I'm not yet a woman, I'm not yet a girl. Those two songs when she did Crossroads, I completely understand why they released that movie, because she obviously doesn't have bad memories towards it. It's explained in here, but I was wondering why they decided to do that other than trying to make more money off of that whole entire part of her life. And we went and saw that because we did go see that in theaters. We were greeted with like an opening special of a melody from like one of her songs from back then, and at the end the two like bonus things of that they played were karaoke to sing with her through both these particular songs. And by the end you totally understand why they released those two songs. So when I sung that song Overprotected so many years earlier, I had no idea the overprotection was. I learned soon because once I made it clear that I wasn't going to keep doing Vegas, my family made me disappear, and that's what kind of started the whole concern. She was supposed to announce that she was supposed to continue her tour in Vegas, and she walked off stage before she could do that, making it very loud and clear that she was not doing it because she didn't want to do it anymore. And they ended up putting her in her facility. They had people come in and talk to her and be like, and declared her mentally unstable. And so they put her in the facility. With that facility, they only want her kids coming to see her once a week. Every Sunday, she was put in there with a whole bunch of other people who were doing really bad things. For a large part of it, she was kept to herself, isolated, and it was pretty horrible. We're going to talk about some of the things that she had gone through. Once again, she mentions again on page 230 how she thought they were going to try to kill her in this facility, which... you know what? That's fair. I think I would have thought the same thing. Then in this facility, this is where lithium comes into play. That was like one of the biggest shocking things, I would say, when she did her speech, was talking about how they put her on lithium. Lithium is extremely deadly, and it does horrible things to your psyche, to just about everything about your body. And she was already on Prozac and a few other things, and she didn't like any of those feelings when she was on these different drugs. And lithium was by far the worst thing she'd ever been on before. It made her feel very, like, loosey and things, and they kept her on this for a year. Fucking crazy. I'd already known that, but it was just crazy hearing about it and reading about it and experiencing it in her mind. You know, the story progresses and stuff. She's starting to realize that maybe, hopefully, one day she can get out of this. And she had thought about how horribly these people were treating her and how horribly these things and how long they kept her for. And a lawyer later say, your dad could have totally put a stop to all that. He could have told the doctors, no, this is too much. Let my daughter go home. And he never did that because he was still making money off her when she was in that facility. They knew if she would have came home, it would become more of an issue. Eventually, she would be able to go home. She also ended up texting a few friends and stuff, she stole a phone, she tried to get people's acknowledgements, and she tried telling her sister, please come help me, and her sister said, stop fighting it, there's nothing you can do about it, so stop fighting it, which is, oof, me and Jamie Lynn, not friends. So while she was there, several fans got together and made t-shirts for Free Britney and went and did some protests and stuff. And then also a lot of other people participated in these things. Several of her friends who were really concerned about her also participated in these things. She said the Free Britney movement is the only reason why she even tried to get out of it, and the only reason why she strived for it. If it wasn't for the fans, she would be dead. It's at the very end of this particular chapter, chapter 43 on page 241, and the fact that my friends and my fans sensed what was happening and did all of that for me, that's a debt I can never repay. If you stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. On 245, she talks about the incident that truly put everything in motion. So the incident was with her son, Sean. But that August, my father, on page 245, that August, my father was arguing with Sean Preston, who was 13 at the time. My son went to lock himself in the bedroom to end the fight, and my dad broke down the door and shook him. Kevin filed a police report. My father was barred to seeing the kids, and that was the moment where she was like, if my dad can't see the kids, that means I'm probably not going to be able to see the kids, and I'm not doing this anymore. And so she went searching. Also, COVID played a huge factor into this because she had so much more time on her hands, and so she realized that she could go looking for all these things that she wasn't able to. So COVID was a quarantine and stuff like that was a big factor. So on page 255, it is stated, Miss Spears, you feel free to address me. The voice crackled through the phone. I was in my living room. It was an ordinary summer afternoon in Los Angeles on June 23rd, 2021. Obviously, that is the day that changed everything. That sets off the last part of this story, or this memoir. On September 29th, her father was suspended, and she got the call. And I felt released on page 260. I felt relief sleep over me. The man who had scared me as a child rolled over me as an adult, who had done more than anyone to undermine my self-confidence and no longer control my life. At that point, with my father eliminated, Matthew told me we had momentum, and he petitioned for the end of the conservatorship altogether. He would soon call her and tell her she was free. That was beautiful. She eventually ended up getting married as well. She posted a thing about it. Then she talks about Holding Me Closer. The only thing I really about Hold Me Closer is that it was the #1 single, and most of her fans, like me, agreed. Thought she sounded beautiful on it, and we were hopeful for more new music, but understood that it took time. She obviously would do another one with Will I Am, which I did not really care for. I can understand why she did that. Now let's talk about Jamie Lynn. So Jamie Lynn is addressed on page 266. The whole entire thing is basically about her. She ended up writing a book that slandered Britney. That book is something that a lot of people read because it came out in the height of all of this. There's a lot of salacious stories in there that were not true, that she made up. And at the very end, she basically says, I've had dreams in which she's spoken about the pain of growing up in my shadow. I'm working to feel more compassionate and anger towards her and towards everyone who I feel is wronged. It's not easy. Because she talks about how Jamie Lynn grew with everything and she grew with nothing, and so she's a very ungrateful child. Which, yeah, that just screams parent, in my opinion, based on everything I have heard about Jamie Lynn Spears. So then let's talk about Instagram. Reading from a paragraph on 270. I know a lot of people don't understand why I love taking pictures of myself naked or in new dresses, but I think if they've been photographed by other people thousands of times, printed and posed for other people's approval, they'd understand that I get a lot more joy from posting the way I feel sexy and taking my own picture, doing whatever I want with it. I was born into this world naked, and I honestly feel like the weight of the world has been on my shoulder. I want to see myself lighter and freer. As a baby, I have my whole life in front of me, and that's how I feel now, like a blank slate. I really do feel reborn, singing as I walk around the house just like I did as a little girl. I enjoy that feeling of the sound of leaving my body bouncing back to me. I'm finding the joy again, why I wanted to sing to begin with. That feeling is sacred for me. I do it for me and nobody else. I keep getting asked when I'm putting on shows again. I confess I'm struggling with that question. I'm enjoying dancing and singing the way I used to when I was younger, and not trying to do it for my family's benefit, not trying to get something, but doing it for me and my genuine love for it. It kind of sounds like someone who has truly fallen out in love with something. They need to go find it again before they can give it to somebody else. So we're getting snippets of it on Instagram and other places, but on page 271, she talked about her relationship with the gay community and how much she loves the gay community and how much she loves her gay fans and her gay dancers and stuff, and how they truly are the truest of her loves because they were there to protect her no matter what. Doesn't matter the situation, doesn't matter the place, and she had the most fun with them. I loved as well. Really early on after she got married, a lot of people criticized her for getting pregnant again. I remember this, and I felt really bad for her because, like, if she wants another child, that's her choice and she deserves it. But they did end up losing the pregnancy, but they posted too early, and so she had to come back, and she says she doesn't regret the way she did it. She just regrets not being able to have this child, and that they are hopeful. By the end of this book, they were hopeful for another. Obviously, now we know that's not the case here. That is the woman in me. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was extremely well written. I thought everything was extremely poignant. She talked about everything. She covered everything that I think everybody had a question with, that we kind of wanted her to talk about. We got a lot of answers, and I think in the long run will help with the talking points and also certain things in like future stuff with her, because I think this brings a lot of perspective from like a lot of people's point of views of her hatred towards her family, her hatred towards this or that. This is very eye-opening, not so much for me because I really understood a lot of that, but I think it's eye-opening for a lot of people, and so obviously I'm gonna rate a 5. I thought it was beautifully written. I know a lot of us were nervous to read a book from Britney Spears because of her captions on her Instagram. Can get a little jumbly, a little crazy. There is 4 or 5 editors who worked on this book with her, and I think they all did a great job to make her words very precise. Could not recommend Britney Spears The One With Me more. If you've not read it yet, there's so much more else to learn in here, by the way. I just wanted to cover the highlights. 50 minutes of highlights? Sure, but the highlights. So, I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.